Thanks. Good morning, afternoon, wherever you are in the country. Everyone, my name is Kerwin Henderson. I'm also a research associate here at the Justice Programs Office at American University. People would normally be on, our director of our office would normally be on this webinar, but she sends her apologies. She had a meeting at the at NADCP today, so she sends her apologies and promised that she will be in attendance at the follow-up session on Friday. But once again, like I said, thank you for joining. There's a lot of good information. I know that's upcoming. I know just with working with the few courts that we've worked with here at the Justice Programs Office that there's a lot of questions pertaining to the role of the mentors and also recruiting mentors, and I'm sure a lot of those questions will get answered today. Following the presentation, the webinar, we will allow about 15 minutes for questions and answers, but feel free to submit your questions, I think, as Monica pointed out, at any point in time, and we'll try and address those as we can. If we don't get to your question during the presentation, the follow-up session on Friday will be sure to try and address some of those questions and concerns on Friday. I'll give just a quick introduction. Mr. Jack O'Connor is the mentor coordinator for the Buffalo, New York Veterans Court. From 1969 to 1970, and was previously served as the director of Medicaid in Buffalo, and is a current member of the VA Hospital Advisory Board in Buffalo. Mr. Greg Coker is a 26-year veteran of the United States Army and Army Reserve. He currently serves as a mentor coordinator and is also a mentor in the Rivers, California Veterans Treatment Court that we've done a lot of work with. So just be brief, let them get into their presentation because I know there's a lot of information out there. So Mr. O'Connor and Mr. Coker, I will turn it over to you both.
Many mentors here, a lot of veterans, judges, lawyers. I thank you all for joining this session. For veterans, I would just like to thank you for your service. Vietnam vets, I only have 2 words for you: welcome home. And those are probably 2 words many of you didn't hear back in the late 60s and 70s. So welcome home, guys. Again, my name is Jack O'Connor, and along with Sergeant Major Coker, we'll be doing the role of the mentor in Veterans Treatment Court. Give you a little background. I trained 80 mentor courts and still stay in touch with about 40 coordinators. I learned a lot from them. I say that only because I'm presenting today isn't exactly the Buffalo model. It's what we've learned as a group from working with these 80 courts. I've made mistakes, and I'm more than glad to tell you those mistakes so you don't make them. Today, there are approximately, this number varies by about 20, but approximately 280 veterans courts in the United States, serving about 14,000 veterans. This figure may be low, but the figure for reservists, there are 260,000 reservists served in OEF, which is Operation Enduring Freedom, or OIF, Operation Iraqi Freedom, and also 350,000 National Guardsmen. It's a whole lot different than Vietnam when we only had 1 tour. Many of these reservists, National Guard, and military have served 3 and 4 tours, and I know many of you veterans know that. The stress that this puts on their families, I know our courts, we have 160 veterans. It's a very large court with 45 mentors. It'd like they have severe, I'm not a counselor, but it looks like the severe problems happen after the 2nd and 3rd tours. The court itself, I'm sure you know this, but if you don't, a veterans court is a treatment court. It works closely with the VA hospital and the VJO, which is a Veteran Justice Outreach Worker. And the 3rd component of a veterans court is the mentors, which a good friend of mine who's a general at the Pentagon calls us the secret sauce. I don't know where he came up with that. But we're the volunteers, and we work closely with the court and the VA, but our job is to work with the mentor. And he's the most important part, or she the most important part of our duty. Okay, let's to the next. We're on the first slide. In travels, folks, I have seen three distinct types of mentor programs. One that's not listed up there is a program that's a rich program, I call it, that has a not-for-profit running it. So the program has the money to do a lot of training. It has the money to pay the coordinators. I wish I had. There are two excellent examples of that. One is Tulsa, Oklahoma, and there is San Diego, California. So if anyone out there has a not-for-profit that will be running their program, we will give you numbers to call at those programs. On the top there, I listed large versus small. Let me tell you what I mean by that. When we first started in Buffalo, the program started in the mental health court, and it's a true story, where a mental health patient wasn't doing well in Judge Russell's mental health court. And I happened to be in the audience, and Hank Porowski is a Marine, was the court coordinator, Vietnam vet. The judge asked me and Hank to go out and talk to this veteran, this Vietnam vet. His head was hung, he wasn't doing well. All that Vietnam vet wanted was to be hooked up with other Vietnam vets. And this is a true story. It's all on it. I was able to get him hooked up at the VA hospital here in Buffalo. Well, the next time he walked into mental health court, he had this big smile on his face. He was standing at parade rest, and I'm not fooling you with this. We all looked at each other, Judge Russell, myself, and Hank, and said, what the hell just happened? That is when the idea of Veterans Court started. Judge Russell said, we have to do a separate track veterans and see what happens. This was back in 2007. And it's me if I'd put together a group of mentors, although I'm not sure we called it that then, just a group of volunteers. We're going to hear my presentation on mentoring, and then when Sergeant Major Coker talks, he will tell you a little bit about his court. All the models I've seen have key concepts. Really, you got to stay by these. Mentors are not counselors. You want a mentor to say, to hell with the counselor, here's what I did, do what I do. It's not good. You could destroy a lot of counseling that goes on. So mentors are not counselors. They're not drill sergeants. This isn't boot camp. The women in our court and all the courts I've been in are very fragile. They have mental health issues, and they're self-medicating with drugs and alcohol. So no yelling at anyone. You can be strong and tell them to hang in there and stand by the rules, but no yelling. Maintain confidentiality. I can't say enough about that, and Greg's going to talk about that in the second half. You're not police officers. We don't report to probation, but Greg will handle that in the second half. But the most important thing is to be a friend. You're your war buddy. Kerwin, you can switch the slide. Stop. Find a coordinator. Again, the coordinator in most of the programs, you don't have to start with a coordinator. If you have 2 or 3 mentors, find out who rises to the top. But whoever becomes the coordinator must agree with the judge and must get along with the court coordinator. So I've seen courts that have started with coordinators and courts that just started with 1 or 2 mentors. When I did skip something in the back there. I wanted to talk a little bit about small versus large, and I can do it right here. When we first started, we were 1-to-1, meaning 1 mentor to mentee. We're going to call people in the court mentees. And at that time, I could do a lot with them. I could 2 hours during the week. I could go to lunch with them. Could really get to know them. Once you go from 1-to-1 to 2, 3, and 4 mentees to 1 mentor, life changes. You can't do all that work, and I tried to do that. I tried to have the mentors do the same amount of interaction with the mentees, even if they had 2 or 3 mentees. It didn't work. I lost mentors, they quit. I had to change, and when you go to a larger program, like ours is 160 with 40-some mentors, you have to refer out. What we do is we have a large resource book, and that's the second point here. And let me give you an example of what's in the resource book. We were small, and a mentee came up to me and said, Jack, I'm real nervous about going Medicaid. Could you send a mentor with me? Sure, go right ahead. Well, what happened, we'd send a mentor, and it all worked fine. But 4 or 5 mentees, you can't do that. So what I did, I developed a list of resources. And if that happened today, I have a resource list, and all the mentors have a copy of it. We have a contact in the Department of Social Services that I'll give the phone to the mentee. He'll call up that contact, and that person will walk him through that resource. That has changed our life tremendously. If the person has a problem with labor, with unemployment, he needs an apartment, he has legal problems, we have resource people that will talk to them. So the mentor doesn't have to do this anymore. Honestly, changed our program to where it's fun now to come into court on Tuesday and be a mentor. But if you're small and you can do the one-on-ones, God bless you, keep doing it. But I called it Plan B. When I had too many mentees, I had to switch to the resource list. Don't overwhelm your mentors. I did. They're volunteers. They can only do so much. Okay, flip to the next slide. Okay, of course I put my stuff give me 1 second here. Again, a mentor is a friend, a warranty, an advocate. I tell you, I first noticed, again, we have a large program, but the mentees will tell us stuff that they won't tell the judge, they won't tell their lawyer, and that's when it's so important for the mentor to coordinate with the court. And I'll give you an example. In fact, it was 2 weeks ago. I had a Marine that came in, and 3 squads in Buffalo. They come every 3rd week. That's because we're so large. So this young Marine was on house arrest living with his mother. And the judge said, "How are you doing?" And the young Marine said, "Fine, everything is fine." Well, the mother is frantically waving at me, and I know what's going on. You know, he's not telling the truth. When he went out, and I went in with the mentor to the interview, and immediately said, "Mr. O'Connor, I need to talk to the judge again. I wasn't lying. I was embarrassed to say that I was living at home and I had a curfew." Because right behind him were 60 veterans that were waiting to be called in the court. So he wasn't lying, he was just embarrassed. So I sent a little memo to the court coordinator who transferred it to the judge, and at the end of the day, the judge called him back and then told the truth. But that's just an example. You never know what the mentee is going to tell you. So, you know, you have to stay close with the court coordinator and with the judge. Acting as a resource. You know, can't say enough about it. And don't be afraid to switch mentors. I have situations where the mentor doesn't get along with the mentee, or the mentee doesn't get along with the mentor. There's no big deal in assigning another mentor. When we first start, I try to match it up. Marine, which is very important. Marines want to talk to other Marines. I mean that the second big category is infantry to infantry. And many times a woman may come in and want to talk to another woman and not a man. So I'll try to match that up. But I can't stay with that match because we're so large. Meaning in week 2, that original mentor might not be there. So I have to assign it to another mentor, and we'll talk a little about how that works. But keep that in mind as your program gets bigger and you have 2 or 3 mentees per mentor. It's kind of hard always to keep that one-on-one. But the person will always have the original mentor and can always talk to him on the phone. And help veterans and their family navigate the VA, social services, and other systems. It is so complicated. Even the VA is complicated. And we'll talk a little bit in the training. They bring in different parts of the VA, bring in different organizations to talk to the mentors so we all understand these different programs that exist. All mentors are military. We're all going to run into this situation where a Gold Star mother asks you to be a mentor. I'm going to say no to her? I know I'm not. So what we do is we have a second line of folks, honorary mentors, and they're folks that want to work with us, but they're not veterans. And it works fine with me. I have about 15 of them. They're called honorary. And if I go out, a mentor goes out, and the mentee wants to talk to one of these people, we just bring them out. So you may do that differently in your court, but that's what works for us. Flip the slide. I don't mean to be negative, but I've had more trouble, folks, with some mentees that think they know more than the counselor. I might have said this statement, forget what the counselor said. Here's what I did, do what I do. Don't let them do that. That person's gone. You're not a drill instructor. You're not their priest. You're not their banker. Don't give them money. There's places that will help out. No money. And if you can believe it, intimate partners, that's happened in my court, and I've had to dismiss the mentor. You're not a lawyer. I've heard mentors in other courts say, oh, I know what to do. This situation happened to me. Don't listen to your lawyer. Here's what you should do. No, that's not good. Don't let that happen. I know it all. I think Greg threw this one in. You're there to listen. At least that's what the mentors that I have talked to. You've got to listen to what's going on with the person when you're talking to them. Mistakes I made. I had this lady she was going to graduate. She was in the program about 13 months. And then 2 staff sergeants, 2 women from our base here in Western New York. And within 5 minutes, she told them she was raped in Afghanistan. I couldn't believe it. We were real close. And she said, Jack, I just couldn't tell you. I just couldn't tell you. I make sure now that we have 8 women mentors, and we have 2 at each session. So just a point that I think you should know. Secondly, we've had about 400 people go through our court, about 180 graduates. When they come in, about 25% have no health care. I mean, it's hard to believe. A lot of these are Vietnam vets. So you Vietnam guys will understand this. When I got out, the VA hospitals were terrible in this area, just terrible. So a lot of these guys have just grown up, got jobs, now are retiring, and they keep thinking the VA hospital is awful. It's one of the best hospital systems that I've been around, especially here in New York and in all the places I visited. There are some problems. In most cases, it's an excellent hospital. So the judge will have to get a mentor to take him to the VA to sign him up. You have to have insurance. The second thing that I notice is a lot of the vets, especially the younger ones, have problems with their disability claims. So get some, what we call them here in New York is adjudicated claims officers. You may call them service officers. They're trained how to do a disability claim. Some of them as mentors. So the first 2 things we do, and Judge Russell thanks them for being a vet and for staying in court, we get their insurance squared away, and we work on a disability claim if they have one. And the third thing is just don't put too much pressure on your mentors. I think I said this before. Been on them too. Sometimes I'd say about 60% of my mentors are 100% disabled, and many have PTSD. And sometimes these guys will take on the hardest cases, and they end up showing symptoms of their PTSD. I was called by a mentor's wife, and she said, Jack, what are you doing? Bill is starting to show some of the symptoms he had before he went to counseling. Just be aware of that. And in that situation, I sat down with Bill. I said, Bill, you got to take some time off. I love you, buddy. You got to get back into counseling. Some mentors go to the same counselors as their mentees, and they'll take a month off, and when they're ready, they'll come back. I don't want to lose them as a coordinator, and we'll talk on the last slide about coordinators. You have to keep tabs on your mentors that they don't take too much responsibility. Key components of any mentor program. Again, document your program. We have procedures that you can use from our courts. Again, justiceforvets.org. We'll have that email address for you. It's the national program in Washington that trains veterans courts. They have tons. They have many procedures from courts throughout the country. So you don't have to invent a new one. Copies of these, see what fits your program and use it. Develop a contract. I've lost about 20 mentors since we started in 2008. And I remember having awful times interviewing them. Sometimes I'd forget to say certain things. Now I have a contract, and really take a look at our contract. You can change it to make it fit in your court, but it lets the mentors know what's expected of them here in Buffalo and what isn't expected. And I don't mean the negative, but that's important. What isn't expected of them and what shouldn't do. And on the end of it, there's a confidentiality statement. You discuss your discussions with mentees, with your friends or anyone else, even if you leave the mentoring program. I know it's just a signed statement, but we make sure that they know we think this is very, very important. Recruit and train mentors. Again, you have a not-for-profit, you have all the resources to do that. I recruit mainly at the VA hospitals. At our hospital, we have a lot of volunteers there. I recruit from the service organizations in our area. The VFW has been real big, VVA, Vietnam Vets of America, and the younger groups at colleges are coming in. So the coordinator has to do that, or maybe you have someone else in your areas that has to do that, but someone's got to take on the recruiting thing. You're going to lose mentors and gain mentors. It's a monthly thing. Training. Folks have very stringent training programs. I don't. I have 3 squads that come one every third week. 3 squads. It's hard to get them all together. My training consists of I'll bring in programs at the end of the court. Let's say the VA homeless program, and they have 40 minutes to talk to us. The next week I'll bring in unemployment. The next week Catholic Charities. The next week whatever. So our training consists of short sessions after the court to talk to us mentors about what's available to us. The resource list. Start from scratch. It doesn't take long. You may bring in a mentor that retired from the county veterans. He was the county veterans director. He has a huge resource list. You may bring in an accredited service officer who has a huge resource list. Put them together. Someone at the Veterans Court level has to develop a resource list, no matter what kind of a program you have. You need to know what's out there. We have, like VVA here, Vietnam Vets of America, they have large food pantries. The AMVETS have no food pantries, but they have furniture stores. So every service agency has a different commodity they can help with, and someone's got to write those down. The Reserve National Guard organizations, I can't say enough about them. They give me money, and we'll talk about a 501c3. In Buffalo, we give out, it's kind of sad, $2,000 a month just for bus passes. Just for bus passes. These folks have alienated themselves so much after they get arrested that the judge can send them too many programs for counseling, but they can't get there. They've lost their jobs, their car. So in our area, at least, transportation is a really big thing. But make sure you bring in and meet with your service organizations. I probably belong to almost all of them. We have 35 different here in Western New York, and I try to stay in touch with as many as I can. You all probably have local Veteran Affairs offices or state Veteran Affairs offices. I ask for retiree lists when people retire from the New York State Veterans Office, and they live in Buffalo. I try to get them to be mentors. Thing to do. And it's very important that you work closely with the VJO. We talked a little before about the court consisting of the VA, the treatment court itself, and mentors. But I work very closely with the VJO in our court, Veteran Justice Outreach Worker. Most hospitals have one, and that's probably going to be the person associated with your court. Bring me problems, usually financial problems, and we'll try to help out with that. But stay close to your VJO. Next slide. People, it's not brain surgery, and I mean that. I've seen some programs that's very complicated. Again, we're advocates. We're a resource for the vet. I actually sit in the audience at programs so big, and I work with the families. I love to talk to the mothers, fathers, kids that come into the court. In fact, those of you that have a court, if you see a graduation, you'll never forget it. And a quick example is I remember a young man when we first started. He had about 3 felonies against him. He had a chip on his shoulder. He was a piece of work. The only one standing next to him was the mentor. He had disowned his family, his friends. He was all by himself. A year and a half, that young man was graduating. We give a coin out, a coin they graduate. The mentors give it to him. His family was back in court. His mom and dad were there. His friends were there. The mentor obviously was still there. But I learned a good lesson from that instance, because I knew then that we mentors in the court and the VA, we didn't just save a veteran, we saved the whole family. Keep that in mind. We talked a little bit about setting up training sessions. That again should be the job of the coordinator. Next slide. I'll turn it over to Sergeant Major Coker.
All right, thanks, Jack. Great. I want to introduce myself. I'm retired, and my job was kind of neat to keep on the Sergeant Major's piece. But I have a unique situation, whereas I am a mentor coordinator in one court, and I'm a mentor in another court. I'm a mentor in the Riverside court. We have about 64 justice-involved veterans, and in the San Bernardino court, which is probably 5 miles up the road, 2 county seats, up to 34 justice-involved veterans. And the court operates differently. One court only allows for felons, so they take people who are incarcerated, and the other court allows both. So I have a pretty unique situation. One, I'm actually was startup, a mentor program, and the other one was somewhat established. But what I have to do is focus a little bit on what, building on what Jack was talking about, but more of the relational. We'll talk about the process, but we'll also talk a little bit about relational in the sense that what kind of relationship are we trying to build between the mentor, mentees, as well as the judges, attorneys, and everyone else who's involved. And so, when we look at the duties, the attendance at court. Now that's kind of one of the mainstays, and depending on what kind of program you have, but it is beneficial to have a mentor at the court session because it gives us support those needs. The other piece, when we look at the participation of the lead mentor sessions, as well as when we looked at the assigned by the judge. And this is really important because the relationship that the mentor program or the mentor has with the judge or the court clerk is really key and instrumental to creating a successful program. The kind of relationship to whereas the judge or the person, the court clerk can feel confident that you have some of the support. So again, we're looking at the relationship. And when we look at support and understanding, is basic. Key here is that a lot of times those guys are facing things like fear, common things that some of these judges and some of the other individuals out there are aware of. But these are the kind of things that we see really up close and up front is here. Uncertainty, pain in some cases, hopelessness. And those are the kind of things that the mentors out there, we need to be looking at. And so we need to be able to take approaches that will help facilitate someone in those areas. And so every trying to share with you is about building a relationship. Assisting the veterans, we need to have a good understanding or a understanding of what the concerns of the media is. What that may be. It talked about insurance, and so to be that how we build a relationship is understanding those pieces and making an impact. And if you have the answer, then go with that answer. But there's nothing better said than someone who doesn't answer and comes back to that mentee and says, you know what, this is something you can do, because they're looking for that. in a lot of cases, through some fault of their own, systems have failed them. They have failed themselves. So you come back and you have an answer for them. You give an answer. You understand them, and the mentee will then become more willing to open up to you, and you're building that relationship. Next slide. We talk about relationship. Important. One of the things that when you look at awareness, the mentor needs to be aware. These are the key things that my background as a sergeant major, I don't go pretty rich, but I want everybody accountable to the best of their ability. And sometimes, in some of the cases, we've got individuals out there who at one point may have had a good time in the military. I mean, if they've done several years, there may have been some times when they felt good about what they've done, and then things may change. But having awareness and ability and observation, and so I always kind of take the situation a little serious in the sense that they're in these situations because of something they're dealing with their nexus to their country. I want to make sure that I'm creating an environment that I'm aware and that obligation to them. I'm going to help you through this thing. And there's a seriousness because we run into challenges with some of our mentees not taking it serious. One of the key things I see sometimes, and I'm sure Jack can attest to it too, is that the guy in a program, and he may have been in several different programs, so they may not be taking it seriously. And you'll know that. You'll know when a guy is not giving his all in a program, and he's in appointments, and he's going to get into understanding how that happens. But we need to make sure that we are holding them accountable in the sense that we're helping them move forward, grow. One of the other things that we do is that we do things that help build them up. You see a picture there with guys in a tie. We did a Dress for Success where the clothes are donated, and those are all mentees. So we're taking them to the next level in terms of these are some of the things that they need to be aware of, but to grow. What will it take to get to the next level? What will it take to be better than we are? So that was a program that we did. It was a success. It was well attended, and everybody who came walked away with a tie. Clothes and things were donated. So we're being really mindful of ways to help mentees grow. The other key thing that in terms of building a relationship, and Jack kind of talked about listening. One thing, I can't remember where I got the concept, but two years, we listen as much as we speak. And that's a great piece for the mentor because a lot of times these are mentees. I mean, they have maybe some type of direction that they kind of know what the right answer is, or potentially may know, meaning that they know what they've done is wrong. So sometimes letting them talk and them walk themselves through, just add in a word or two, but just listening more than we speak. It's been really key. And then building relationships, having a relationship as a mentor, with the corps that creates a positive environment, and being involved. One of the things that as a mentor, I'm able to call on certain organizations to get help. Have a great relationship, and I think Jack talked about it, with my Veterans Administrator, Veterans Affairs Director. I've got a direct line in with them, and so if we send them over there for an individual we want to send over there for certain benefits, we can call him directly, and he has assigned somebody, so it doesn't go into like the black hole, if you will, or a hole that the guys get put on hold. Somebody doesn't call back. So create those kind of things, relational pieces. will go far in building your relationship and your rapport. As a mentor and mentor coordinator, you have those things available to you support. Next slide. Yeah, it's really, I look at this as a relationship. We talk about trust is earned. A couple things there. Mentors, we must work to gain trust of our mentors as we gain the trust of our judges and POs and other people around us, because that's going to allow us to be instrumental in the judges or the attorneys or other organizations feeling confident about what you're doing and what you're not doing. And so by having that trust level and you get trust for the mentor by listening and accomplishing the things that you said you were going to do. Hey, I'm going to help you at least file the paperwork to get your claim. We're going to do those. So there's things you can do. You can't promise them, hey, you're going to get a certain meeting or these things will happen, but there are things you can move them along, and that gains trust with that mentee. And I would just ask any of the judges or clerks out there, if you're out there, that you have to trust your mentor, coordinator, mentee. If you trust them, they shouldn't be there. And what I mean by that is because you have to allow them the ability to work in the best interest at their role and in their lane, go forward with the mentees. So trust is a big piece on both sides, and as we know, that most of the successful programs have the mentors in it, and so that is something that has to be earned and gained on both sides. And then the other piece, when we talk about that the mentee is not a project. I mean, we can't take it so personal that we project a failure. I mean, I've had scenarios where there's guys that I've called and worked with on a regular basis, and I knew the gentleman was going to be heading for a fall because he wasn't truthful, meaning he did what he needed to do and he missed appointments. I could always tell that this gentleman was invested in terms of he thought he was going to be better than me or do more, or that the system, he basically was smarter than the system. And so this individual, unfortunately, ended up being put out of Veterans Court and going to having the higher case jail time, prison time over his head. I took that pretty hard, and I learned from that I'm going to always do my best effort. It is more important that they do the best that they can as well. Next one, we look at the mentors. Let them know, Jack talked about it, what we can do and what we can't do. The other piece is the written documentation. We need to ensure that we do have things written down, because a mentor does not fly by the seat of our pants, meaning that we'll come in and just kind of figure this thing out as we go along, because it's serious. We've got a lot of people looking for help, a lot of mentees, so we do need to have that, and it's well documented out there from Justice for Vets and other great programs, such as the San Diego Tulsa program and of course Buffalo program. So we need to document processes that are out there. Just having a contract, I think that is really key, because it adds value to the mentors. So when you bring in a mentor and you recruit a mentor in, and you have a written contract, a document, that just sets the tone for success and allowing the mentor to exactly what the expectations are. Okay, next slide. And that's a huge one, and for normal. What I'm talking about here is, and when we talk about morals and practices that govern personhood, we're not talking about the the political climate of today. We're not talking about being politically correct. I'm not even thinking about and even trying to deal. What is in mind, and Jackie, let me know if you've got other takes on that. But I'm talking about with dealing with in our mentees. There was at one point I had a question there: should you go out and or have a beer with a mentee? We say absolutely not. And what I mean when we talk about those, you might have a mentor, a mentee that says, "Hey, or mentor, this guy, he wasn't in for substance abuse. He had a DV case or whatever it may be." But those kinds of things, when I talk about the moral principles, it's really discerning where you're at and discerning the folks that we have and that we're working with. You know, should you be dating a mentee, those kind of things. And so, and I think that most of us will really line up on those kind of things. And if you don't, then that's when you ask the mentor coordinator and have a policy. They're relationships. And that was the story about an attorney who was a mentor, but as while he was a mentor for an individual, he relieved himself from that mentor, so he did conflict of interest in terms of being an attorney. So those are the kind of things we can look at, and then just understand yourself. We have likes and dislikes, and as a mentor, we need to be fully aware of that, so that not minimizing the best mentor we could be, and that would be really key to success of our mentees. And then just to speak for ourselves, just realizing we keep our own mentees carbon copies of ourselves. We don't. That's not the goal. I'm not looking for everybody to be as if the sausage would be about anything, and that's not the case. And there are a lot of different success levels, and they don't have to do various different ways to be successful. So, okay, so. I've lost my picture. Are you still further? Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. That's my picture, but I'm still tracking on. My next slide is about respect for the goal. So this is really key for judges, probation officers, court staff. That is probably some of the biggest challenges that Jack may even attest to. Respect for that role, because a lot of it is a unique role. It is the mentor is the third leg of the table. It might even appear to be insignificant, because you've got the rules of law and you've got all of these processes that need to go through. With the absence of the mentors, you take out the person that we're working with. I mean, Jack told a very incredible story in the change and the initiation of the Veterans Court. So that should be very mindful of the importance of the mentor. They're not taking over anybody else's role. They have a lane to stay in, and that's the challenge that asks the mentor to stay in your particular lane. But I would ask or request that you individuals in the court that you very full as they give respect to. So one of this is one of the most challenging pieces that we run up against is that their role and responsibility, which is really important. And then I say that most courts, and so I'll back up too, about the biggest challenge is getting that information and telling. If a mentee tells me that, hey, you know what, I'll tell them that I'm not a part of the court, and I will not tell the judge, and will not tell probation. And ask that the judges and probation and those guys don't ask us to do that, because what you do is you diminish our role. You become, once we lose our trust and credibility, we have no fight, and it'll spread like wildfire. If one of the guys tells us something, it comes back up in court, or the probation officer mentions that, then that will go through like wildfire, and they say you can't trust that guy, and just wasting our time. So we need to ask for support and tackle that. Then with the members, the courts have for resources. They can get information. You got probation. You got a lot of other organizations that are built up in the process to get information you need. If everybody's doing what they do, then you'll get the information that you need on those mentees or those justice involved veterans. When we go to the mentees and just the interview process, this is designed to help the mentee to get so that we can get the process information that we need to have to help them. So that we go out to the place like Jack does, go out to the Veterans Affairs and solicit the support. So when we look at safety concerns, what we look at this is that the only time we're mandated to talk to anybody or go back to the judge or to patients is if they talk about harming themselves. We're quickly able to do that, harming themselves or harming others. And Jack has a story. He told about an individual that said something in court and it was overheard, and so we took action to on TV. So those are kind of things that are, I think, are really key to success. Is there respect, mutual respect, and understanding, and having the right people that you have in place are creating that. I mean, you could have mentors that you judges and attorneys out there that you may not agree with, may not think is the best person, but build a relationship, because it's really not about mentor, not about the process. It's really the relationship and the mentee, and that justice involved the veteran. Okay, next slide. And that's when we talk about the 501(c). I'll just share a little bit about my organization. What we have here is we have a 501(c), and really starting to grow and growing, and it's partnered with the court. And the piece about that is that you all know that in the court system, you have rigid and rightfully so structured. There are certain things you can do. Donations and lists, especially at the judges, you can go out and reach out and gain support. Jack gives $2,000 of bus passes out a month. That's pretty incredible. And so the court systems don't have that money, and so 503(c) is the best way to do that. Compatibility, they're mostly community-based. They have the ability to reach out. Is the first umbrella organization in that way, and some other nonprofits have the ability and will allow you to partner with them and to use all of their 501(c) information, so you don't necessarily have to go out and start one. And in most cases, those they can be pretty costly. But partner with an organization, your support, so things were written to them. However, they'll probably get like 8% of whatever that is, but they're able to go out to other organizations that would be able to donate and helping veterans. Would have a 501(c), and so you can get support from those. That's really key. So you don't go out there and do that all along. The organizations that have those kind of things going on really strong is your Tulsa. Their 501(c) pretty much runs a lot of it, or the connective type, and partnering with the court, as well as San Diego. And so you have some organizations that have strong 501(c)s, Orange County, and that's key in getting the support for stuff for the veterans. Veterans donations, those kind of things are always ongoing. There's always things that you can do for that add credibility as a mentored organization. Helps I'll just end and got to transportation. And Jack, you have some insights on those?
Oh, I think you covered it all. We started with a church, and they charged me 3%, and that was perfect because now I've done my own, and one of the mentors, who is an attorney, actually wrote it up. But it's expensive, and I'm sure you folks know that. To have your own 501c3, just the insurance, I think, is like $1,400 a year for me, and then you have to do certain filings. So if you're small, I would say try to umbrella with someone. Maybe the judge knows a not-for-profit, or, again, your United Way, or whatever group you can come up with. But you need that. Someone's going to come in and give money. I never thought I'd be doing this. Once someone knows about the court, they're going to want to donate. Especially banks, an area some doctors do that treat a lot of Vietnam vets with prostate cancer. They've donated money to us. So it's a good thing to do, and again, the court can't do it, the VA can't do it, but the mentor coordinator can.
Jack?
Yeah.
Did I able to go over that? I think my phone got cut out on me there a little bit.
Yeah, you were, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we got one more, and we're both going to do this. The mentor coordinator. I would just say to you coordinators out there, I know there's a few of you, and the judges, I just think it's very important for the judge to know and trust his coordinator. I meet with Judge Russell twice a week. After the court, I meet with him. He shares information with me during the week. He told me we got a coming in next week from the 10th Mountain Division up at Fort Drum, and we actually have a mentor who is from Fort Drum, but he's not scheduled for next week, so I'm going to call him up and get him there. But I think my point is we just talk a lot. You're not giving away any confidentiality if you say, Judge, it looks like a lot of our guys are having problems with food vouchers this week. We had to give out some vouchers from our local store. So we talk a lot about what's going right and what's going wrong. The big thing, again, though, is you have to assist in their attention. You have to train. And, again, you have to watch your mentors. A coordinator will know if a mentor's starting to experience issues with his PTSD, and it's up to the coordinator to sit down with them and tell him to take some time off. Once your court gets bigger, let me end by telling you what's happened in our court and many courts across the nation. The mentor program becomes so wonderful. They had a young man actually rush the judge in court. He was stopped by the sheriffs, and all he said was, do I have to get arrested to get the benefits of this court? And that really rung in my mind. We were doing so much for arrested veterans as mentors. We actually opened the door to the court an hour early. We let anyone that come in, and a lot of police officers refer people, service organizations. These people aren't arrested. They're regular veterans. But they want to talk to another vet. A Marine will want to talk to another Marine. And they, can you help me out? And we have that resource list, so we can help them out. So I think the mentors really look forward, at least in our court and several other courts that I've been at, to come in early and see who walks in for help. So as your programs develop, just keep that in the back of your mind.
Yeah, Jack, you're absolutely right. I've got a mentor, an older gentleman, a Vietnam vet, and he wasn't a Vietnam vet, but he is so enamored with being a mentor and what we're actually doing. He says, and he's a senior guy, and he says, you know what? I feel alive when I'm around you. And basically what he was saying is that we keep busy. There's so much work to do, and there's so many ways that you can help out, so many connections, and because of I'm sure, and there's a lot of folks that want to help out the veterans, and as a mentor coordinator, we have the opportunity to kind of create that relationship with our court and with our judge, like Jack talked about, and then do some things, make some things happen for our veterans.
And one more thing, the judges and coordinators out there, if anyone want to talk to me, if they're a new coordinator, I keep in touch with about 40. Please feel free to call. We'll give my number out later. And also, Justice for Vets has a list of mentor coordinators. They're going to be doing some training. And if you'd like to get on that list, please get a hold of me, and I'll make sure your name gets into Justice for Vets. That's all I have to say.
Well, thank you both for the presentation. A lot of good information out there. We have a couple of questions that have come in. I apologize to those that have submitted questions if we don't get to them during this session. Like I said, we'll address them in the next session. But the first section is in regards to confidentiality. I know you guys both addressed this in your presentation. But how to deal with confidentiality in terms of a mentor who finds out that a mentee lied in court to the judge. The example that was given was a Marine who lied to the judge about just anything in general. Is it within the mentor's responsibility to let the team know that information?
After that, I say no. And it's a tough subject, and some of you disagree. That's not a crime. What I'll do in our court is we'll bring several mentors, and we'll talk to this guy for a while about honesty, that you have to be honest, because he's going to get caught later. But on an instance like that, no. If he was, I'll tell you what happened last week. Someone was fooling around, said, I'm going to slap the hell out of her when I go home. We got the police in there and the court. So there's a difference. You may disagree with that, but in the situation I gave, we actually went back and talked to the judge and told him why he lied to him, that he was embarrassed. So it's a tough thing to follow. Justice for Vets has a whole PowerPoint on this, so if you want to go to their site, you could probably get it. But it's a fine line, guys, and the coordinator has to make a decision, and if I'm not sure of it, I might go to the judge with a hypothetical. I would say something like, I was just talking to my buddy in Tulsa, and here's what happened. What do you think, Judge Russell? And he'll give me an opinion. So there's ways you can make decisions, but it's not easy. It's not. So I hope I'm answering your question. And that one, no, I wouldn't run to the court.
I want to quickly chime in and be short. I agree with Jack. However, it is incumbent upon what I would do is I talk to that mentee. What is it that you're trying to do? You've got a whole team that's trying to help you here. So what's your goal? And so what I do is I try to place responsibility back on that mentee so he owns up.
Point.
Okay, another question that came in is, do you allow graduates to participate further in the program by becoming a mentor?
Oh, great question. I'm sorry I missed that. We have 4 former graduates that are mentors now, and they're in demand because they've been there and done that. One of them actually took a while to graduate, about a year and a half. He went on to get his degree, and he's now the peer mentor at the VA hospital. So to answer your question, yes. Counselors have told me, though, I should wait a year. Some of it's 6 months to a year, but wait and see how that person does. If he doesn't relapse, he's got to get on with his life. But that would be fantastic if you could get some of your graduates to be mentors.
I agree. I think it's ideal. In our situation, we wait about 6 months. But when we're waiting with eyes on, what are you doing? That kind of thing.
All right. I know we're running a few minutes over, and just to point out, for those of you that have to leave or miss any part of the presentation, this will be archived on our website, and we'll be sending out an announcement when it is on our website, and we'll the slides and the whole entire presentation available to you. So I apologize if you missed any part or have to leave early. Next question that came in, are there any specific tasks that honorary mentors partake in which will allow them to support veteran mentors and mentees?
Great question again. Sometimes, like we have one man that's he owns about 200 apartments in the Western New York area, and he wants to help veterans. He's not a veteran, so he'll sit there, and if a mentor's out there and we find out that the guy needs an apartment, we go get John and bring him right out there. We have another guy that works for the Red Cross. He's not a mentor, but he's not a veteran, but he has to help with helping mentoring the mentees. If we find out there's a need for the Red Cross to get involved, we'll pull him in. We have people that are lawyers that want to do it for, let's say there's a problem in family court, and they'll do it pro bono, but they're not veterans. 3 of them, and I love these 3 guys because we have a lot of our guys have issues in family court, and they can't afford a lawyer. So right in court, so the mentor would come out, get one of these attorneys to go out there, and they represent them over in family court. Every area probably has a unique or a certain problem that might persist more than others. That's where I'll try to get an expert and see if I can get him into the court. He'd be on my resource list, but if it's happening every day, I'd like him in the court and make him an honorary mentor.
And that's so key, because that's what, as a mentor, we should be looking for, is getting those other people involved, and because they could do way more than what we could do amongst ourselves. So great one, Jack.
All right, I guess we have time for my one more question. What specifically is documented in a mentor program? The mentors, what information is documented?
I'd like to get some clarification on that. Do they mean the mentor contract? See, we have a book here in Buffalo, but we have so many people. Each mentee has their own book. I keep that locked up. And the book consists of 3 sections. The first section is a history of the veteran, both his military and family life. The last section is that list of 160-some resources. And in the middle, we make little notes on what happens each week, like sent bill to unemployment, or Jim needs an attorney for family court. That way, the new mentor comes in or the old mentor leaves, that we have a little history of what went on with them. I can't remember what happens with 160 people in my court. So I'm not saying you have to keep a log, but if that's what the person means, I lock these books up every week, and when I go in next Tuesday, I'll pull the 50 or 60 that are going to show up, and I control those books. Some people have other ways of doing it. So I'm not sure that that's what the person means. If they want to see our contract, I'm sure, Kerwin, you can get it to them, or our procedures, you can get it to them. Hope I'm answering their question.
Absolutely. Yeah. Go ahead.
What I do is, too, is that there are a couple of challenges, and the way that Jack took it in terms of the support piece. However, have been some challenges in certain courts about keeping the log and not keeping the log, and is that kind of a thing to be, utilized for court and missing. And that's where you got to have a relationship with your court, with your organization, and with your justice. Because those logs, I like the concept that Jack talked about. I mean, in terms of having it as a resource, not much as I talked to this guy and he said he's going to do this or going to do that. So you have to be mindful of those kind of things, and you have some places out there where they're challenged to say, well, we don't want to create a log because it's admissible, and so you really got to have a understanding with your court in particular, as well as your attorneys there.
Good point. And there's nothing confidential in this log. If someone's saying something to you that he wants confidential, that would not be in there. I would have a statement like, if Bill needs to talk to Jack about issue 1, have him call him. But, we're very careful on what goes in that. And, Greg, you're right. Some courts don't want anything to do with it. I just don't know how to keep certain information on 160 people. What ends up is we start all over, and we have so many people that it's not good to do. So it's up to you. If you don't want to use a log, the coordinator is going to have to somehow keep information on each mentee to tell the new mentor that's assigned to the case.
Thank you, Jack, and thank you, Greg. We're a little bit over, so we're going to go ahead and end this session today, but we have a follow-up session on Friday, March 4th at 1 p.m. Any questions that we didn't have time for today will be addressed in that session. Additionally, if there's any questions that you'd like us to address, feel free to send an email to justice@american.edu. And thank you again.
Thank you all.
Thank you.